Okay, so let's begin here. So the due date for assignment number 1 will be Wednesday at noon. Please email it to me. When you do email it to me, the file name itself should be your name, because if everyone hands in something to me called assignment1.docx, it makes it difficult for me to simply copy it over to the correct folder on my computer, because I'm always going to have to change the file name myself. So please make the file name your name. Please note that there is no class next Monday because of Labor Day. The whole university is closed. Also, I want to talk about something regarding seminars in our department. So, pretty much all academic departments have a seminar series when you're at a research university. And basically what this is it allows students, faculty, and visitors from other universities, like faculty or maybe people who are working at a company, to come give a presentation. These presentations can involve research, such as a faculty member who has a paper that they're working on or is currently under review. They can present information on that paper. It can also be, for example, dissertation defenses. It can be dissertation proposals, meaning this is what I propose to do my dissertation on, which is part of the PhD comprehensive exam for students. Or instead of research, it can be general interest topics, such as here's how you use the supercomputers on campus. So we had somebody from the Holland Computing Center on campus come give a seminar last fall regarding those computers. It can be, for example, about 10 years ago, I gave a seminar on how to use tablet PCs for teaching purposes. So there's a lot of other general interest topics that these seminars can be over. Now, attendance by faculty and graduate students is not required. Please note that is a change from what we've had in the past if you by chance talk to other graduate students. Attendance is not required, but it is expected. Meaning, obviously there are some times where you just can't show up. Okay. We're not going to make you attend. But I highly recommend that you attend as many as you can. Our seminars are generally most Wednesdays at 3 to 4 p.m. in Hardin, room 49. These will be announced via email. Now, have you guys by chance gotten an announcement of this Wednesday's seminar? Okay. There is going to be one this Wednesday. And in fact, it can be a helpful one to you, because what it's about is all the faculty members are going to give 3 to 4 minute short presentations about their research. And so this is a great way to find some faculty member who has perhaps common interest as you. And of course, if you're just beginning, you're all just beginning our program, so you might not necessarily know what your interests are, but maybe something will, pique your curiosity, and maybe that will put you on a path towards a particular research topic down the line. But anyway, so that's this Wednesday. There's typically a pre-seminar get-together. I forgot to put the room there, but it's basically the lounge area, like where the student mailboxes are. That's typically where we have our pre-seminar get-together. It usually starts maybe at 2:30, and the faculty or the statistics GSA will bring like brownies or cookies or stuff like that. Just it gives an opportunity. It's not a requirement, but it gives you an opportunity if you want to socialize with others. Now, with these seminars, there can be a great amount of variability from one seminar to the next in terms of the amount of material that you understand. Now, if I were to, for example, give a seminar on a paper that I am publishing in the Journal of the American Statistical Association, I would expect most first-year students are not going to have a really good understanding of what's going on it. Hopefully, the first 5 minutes, because at least this is how I would do my presentation, the first 5, maybe 10%, 10 minutes will give you a motivating example about why this research is important. So at least you'll get a basic understanding of why this is important to statisticians or even others. But the rest, the research stuff, might be more difficult to understand. But then again, there's going to be some seminars that, yeah, you're going to be able to understand it all. So just don't feel bad if you go to a seminar and realize, I have no clue what that person's talking about. Don't worry about that. As you go throughout your graduate career, you will start learning, understanding more and more and more of those types of seminars. Okay, are there any questions regarding these seminars? Okay, so are there any questions overall before we get going? So last time we left off talking about advisement here. So as I said last time, all of you have a temporary advisor, and maybe I didn't necessarily communicate this completely. Your temporary supervisory committee, meaning a group of faculty who are supervising your studies here. A temporary supervising committee is Yushin and myself. Now, if you're a master's student, by the end of the spring semester, you need to make a decision. Do you want this temporary supervising committee to be your permanent supervisory committee? Or do you want to find your own permanent advisor, and that advisor will help you get a permanent supervisory committee? It is up to you. Now, there are benefits to doing the latter option of going on your own and finding an advisor on your own. That is, there's probably going to be some faculty member out there that has similar interests as you. And so that particular faculty member will be able to guide you better than necessarily what was originally a temporary advisor. So for example, if you have interest in genetics and statistics, sorry, I know nothing about that area. So my ability to guide you is going to be limited in comparison to many of the other faculty who do have that as an interest. So by the end of the spring semester, you need to make that decision if you're a master's student. Now, if you're a PhD student, and what I say is a PhD student, even if you've been admitted to the PhD program, a PhD student is one who has obtained a master's in statistics already and has passed the PhD qualifying exam. I'll talk more about that exam shortly. So once you've done both, then you are a PhD student, and you will need to find an advisor in a supervisory committee. The temporary advisor, the temporary supervisory committee will not go into being your permanent. You need to find an advisor on your own. Okay? So let's talk about, most of you right now are interested in getting a master's degree here. And typically anybody who gets a PhD in statistics will typically always get a master's in statistics first. Not always, but most of the time. And it's because the master's stuff you need to know for your PhD program, so why not get a master's? So there are the grad school, graduate studies, lays out 3 different options for you to get a master's degree here. And they simply call it option 1, 2, and 3, kind of like type 1 and type 2 errors. Option 1, 2, and 3. Very, very, very rarely will anybody in our department do option number 1, which is the thesis option. It requires 30 credit hours. For this thesis, you're also taking, of these 30 credit hours, you're also taking 6 to 10 credit hours for the thesis itself. So in the end, you're only doing about 24 hours of actual course work. Compare that to option 2 and 3, where you're doing 36 credit hours. So essentially, you're getting about 4 more classes. And if you were to, let's say, leave here with a master's degree, that's a big difference because you want to have a broad background. And so that's why, generally speaking, every student, I think maybe there's been 3 students who've gotten a thesis since I've been here. Generally speaking, every student does either option 2 or 3. I highly recommend that you do that as well. In terms of option 2 and 3, option 2, and the only difference is whether or not you get a minor or not. So you can actually get a minor in another discipline, like maybe computer science. Or we've had actually somebody just is going to graduate this December with a sociology minor. And so there's a lot of different options, and the specific requirements of those minors correspond to what the department says. And so, you know, if a particular area outside of statistics interests you, go to that department's webpage, find out what their requirements are for a minor. Sometimes those requirements are not readily available. You might have to actually contact the graduate chair of that department or just start with the secretary of that department. So, for example, one of our current master's students is getting a minor in educational psychology. And the requirements weren't really out there, and so he had to do a little bit of searching, and he found what the requirements were. Typically, it's like 9 credit hours of courses from the department, sometimes 12 credit hours. So that's the basics of a minor. The majority, though, of our students do option number 3, so they do it without a minor. I would say typically every graduate, I guess, cohort of students, but I would say about 20% of them get minors, 80% don't. They do option 3. So let's take a look at the required courses. So I'm going to jump ahead to page 5. And all of you should have already seen a table like this that's in the student handbook, but I think it's good for us to go through some of the basics of it. So this is a typical timeline that a student will follow to get a master's degree now in our department. For all the master's students here, I know, as I've looked at all the courses that you've signed up for, unless you've made some changes over the last week, and if you have, you need to come talk to me. I think all of you are signed up for the correct courses for the first fall semester. Now, next semester, you basically will do 2 continuations of courses that you're taking right now, and then you'll have room for an elective. In October, when the course schedule comes out, we will talk about what are some options for an elective if you want to take it from the stat department, which most students will end up doing. Also, this particular semester, as I was getting at earlier, you need to make that decision about who your permanent advisor is going to be, and then also your permanent supervisory committee. So in other words, the advisor is part of the supervisory committee. That's why I have a formed supervisory committee. So you need to do that by the end of that semester. With that, you will also, please note that that is in blue, so it's not in the actual notes. You need to submit that memorandum of courses. So that's what you're working on for the first assignment. And you do that in consultation with your advisor and your supervisory committee. So in year 2 then, 2 required courses for that fall. That Stat 825 course is our consulting course. And what this is going to do is give you the background that you're going to need to when you engage with non-statisticians, like a subject matter researcher, subject matter expert. When you are talking with them about their particular statistics problem, is going to give you the background needed to do that in a good, efficient manner. In this particular class, you will have a project that you're going to need to work on. Typically, it's going to be an actual consulting problem where you will work with a non-stat researcher, but there are some other options out there if that doesn't work out in terms of having a consulting problem available for you. And so you're going to work on that project during the semester. And what you're going to need to do in the end is submit a report on it. We think of this course as our capstone course, even though it's not the last semester. It's our capstone course because, especially for those students who are, let's say, leaving with a master's degree, this is really going to set you up for success after when you're working for a company, because you're going to be engaging in the same kind of activities where you're working with non-statisticians. And so you're going to have to do this report in that class. You will also have room for one elective. And in the spring, you have a lot of room for electives. So you could take 3 different courses of electives that spring. But you will also need to take your MS Comprehensive exam. This is a requirement for all students in graduate school here at the University of Nebraska. You have to have a Master's Comprehensive exam. There are 3 options that we have available now in our department. Option 1, an oral explanation of that Stat 825 consulting course project that I just talked about. So for that course, you are actually turning in an actual report. But if you choose this particular way of doing your Master's Comprehensive exam, what you're going to basically be doing is this. During March or April, whenever we set up the date, all students are doing this exam. We will get them all together, and we basically will have poster presentations by each student. And there will be an exam. Well, let me back up a second. So what is a poster presentation? Simply, imagine, I don't know, maybe about this size here, probably a little bit smaller, that you have this sheet of paper where you can print important information about your report that will convey, how you approach the design of maybe it was an experiment or whatever you're working on, how you approach a design, how you approach the analysis, details that so you can convey that information to someone else. Who's that someone else? There's going to be an exam committee of faculty. This exam committee will look at your poster, make sure everything looks okay. Then they will also engage in discussions with you regarding the information on there. And the purpose here is to emulate, again, what you would have out in the real world. And that is, you will be actually verbally communicating, you will be presenting stuff in the real world to people who are statisticians or non-statisticians. And so this is going to give you an opportunity to practice those skills. So that's the Master's Comprehensive exam if you're to do that option there. The second option, and this is, these are up to you, but I think you'll see one option makes sense over the other option depending upon what your goals are. So, if your goal is to go on for a PhD, do the PhD qualifying exam to serve as your Master's Comprehensive exam. So it's going to play double duty, or play a double role, you could say. And so this Master's, the PhD qualifying exam, and I'll talk about this more shortly, is just an exam to assess your readiness for the PhD program. This exam will be the week before courses start your second spring semester. What I recommend is that any student who has at least a little bit of a thinking, yeah, I might want to go on for a PhD, try the exam. If you don't do as well as you would like, well, then do, as I page back, do this, I guess, option A or test A, where you do that oral explanation of 825. Okay. And then lastly, if you were to do a thesis, of course, the Master's Comprehensive exam for you would be an oral defense. And what oral defenses are is that you give a presentation on your research, an oral presentation like in a seminar-like format. And then afterwards, everyone leaves the room except for your supervisory committee, and then they ask you questions for like a half hour or hour about it, just to assess your understanding of the material, to make sure that, they'll ask you, like, why didn't you do this versus that? And as long as you have a good basis for good reasoning, okay, that's fine. Some people will approach a problem differently than others, but as long as you have a good reasoning why you approached it a certain way, that will be fine. Okay, so that's, I guess, the 5-10 minute intro to the master's degree, the requirements. Any questions?
When do they do their retake for the PhD qualifying?
They will do that towards the end of May. So let's say, unfortunately, a student does not pass in January, then they don't have to wait that long. They go to the probably around Memorial Day. That's when you would do it. You get 2 shots at that exam. So let's say you don't pass it that first time, you can still, you can make sure you get that master's degree, of course, and do that that Stat 25 presentation essentially, and then take the PhD qualifying exam again. Let's talk about the PhD degree. Now, there's not only a few of you who are immediately going into the PhD program, but I think a number of you, at the very least, are interested in going on for the PhD after the master's. So let's talk about this. So, in total, 90 credit hours. So remember, you got 36 from the master's. Well, you can apply that 36 towards that 90. And typically, what's done is about one third of the credits will be from a master's degree, either from here or from another university. 1/3 will be credits from doing a dissertation. So there's a particular course, that 999, that you sign up for when you're working on your dissertation. And what is a dissertation? Well, it's simply, I shouldn't say simply, it is basically an original set of research that's going to forward the statistics discipline. The typical format for a dissertation is that there are 5 chapters. First chapter, Introduction to the Problem. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are actual papers that can be submitted to a statistics journal. So, and then chapter 5 is conclusions, ideas for future research. It is obviously it's a big process, and that's why about 30 credit hours are from working on the dissertation. When I've had students do dissertations with me as their advisor in the past, sometimes we only do 2 chapters that are actual papers, so we have basically 4 chapters overall. But that 5th chapter then might contain or will contain more information than what would normally be in a 5th chapter if someone had done 3. So we'll really lay out what would be future research, or would really describe maybe the statistical software that's available, that they've made available to disseminate their work. And then 1/3 of the credits then is from additional coursework. So you're going to have some required PhD courses, but there's going to be room for electives too. So let's go ahead and jump ahead to that table that shows that. So this table is constructed assuming a student got a master's degree from our department first. In the student handbook, there are other tables out there that show what would happen if they came from another university. But still, it's a lot of the same things. So that's why I just, to save time, chose just to do this here. So courses where you see the actual course number are required courses. These are typically PhD theory courses, similar to, like I said, 882, 883. There's room, now also where these courses are placed in here, I wouldn't be surprised will change. I just know for this particular academic year, I know when Stat 980, 982, 983 will be offered, so that's why I put them in here like this. The key, though, is that we will offer these required courses at least once every 2 years. Why not every year? Well, there's typically less students that go on for a PhD. And so, there are certain requirements that the university has about how many students can be in a class before you can offer it. So that's why for PhD required courses, even though it's required, typically it's like a 2-year cycle. So during your first year, you got some 900 level courses, room for elective, and I wouldn't say we're necessarily as picky here, but you should at least start thinking about who your PhD advisor will be. Start thinking about that supervisory committee. Definitely by the end of your first year, you've got a decision. You've made a decision. Also, with this forming the supervisory committee, you're also going to have that program of study, which is part of the also part of the assignment that's due on Wednesday, that if you're a PhD student, start putting together that, that program of study, similar to the memorandum of courses. Ideally, it would be nice to them to submit that document by the end of that first year, but it's not necessarily as critical as like with the master's program when you make that submission. So in year 2, you got some more required courses. Notice here, you're starting to take Stat 999, meaning you're starting to work on that dissertation. So this is often a time period when you are maybe doing a literature review, for example, seeing what else has been done in this area there. That might give you ideas of where to go with your research, or typically most students will follow what their professor has laid out in terms of, I want you to work on this problem, now go look at the literature to see options that are available for us. So you start working on that dissertation. And then there is another exam, a PhD comprehensive exam. What this is a dissertation proposal. In general, I don't think it's necessarily as let's say, the PhD qualifying exam can be kind of stressful. This is not going to be as stressful. This PhD comprehensive exam is going to be at least a dissertation proposal, meaning, okay, I've spent most of this academic year looking for options for my dissertation. Here's what I propose to do. If you end up deviating from it, that's okay. But the purpose here is to kind of be a check that, yes, you are making progress, you're going in the right direction, and if you're not going the right direction, we can at this moment start guiding you in the right direction. So the PhD comprehensive exam is typically a dissertation proposal where you actually give a seminar, and it's open to the public. Then everyone leaves the room except for your supervisory committee, and then they'll ask you questions. And your advisor, again, will help you get ready for that exam. Then in year 3, so if you're starting here without a master's degree, so essentially this is year 5 total that you'll be here. Year 3, completely dissertation stuff. Then you got your final oral exam. This is often referred to as dissertation defense. Again, that's where you defend what you've done for your research. I wouldn't say necessarily it's like a adversarial kind of thing, or where you would think like the word defense would mean that, but rather it's just making sure that you can communicate what you've done, and you can justify the path that you follow. Some students will spend 2 complete years on their dissertation. When I was a student, I ended up spending 2 complete years. I don't know of any student who's ever finished earlier than this in terms of getting out at year 3. There have been students who have actually spent year 5, 6, and so on, but that's at rare instances. And usually it's because maybe they've, for example, started a family and stuff, and so they're unable to spend as much time working on it. But 3 or 4 years. Okay. Are there any questions? Let me make sure I covered everything here. Any questions?
If you went into academia and you went ABD, would that be after year 4 and continue working on your dissertation at that point?
So let's make sure everyone knows what ABD means. It's an abbreviation you can say for all but dissertation. I strongly recommend don't leaving here ABD still having to do your dissertation. I've seen that happen a number of times, and those students really, really struggle doing that dissertation because they have a full-time job and they're still doing their dissertation, which is a full-time job. And that's just a bad thing to do. Obviously, in some instances you have to do it for family purposes or other reasons, but I recommend it. Other questions? Okay, so here's my advice. So As I was getting prepared for this today, I was thinking, about half my life now I've spent in the graduate school realm, you could say. I started grad school in 1994, and I'm 44 years old now. So about half my life I've been involved with this. So one reason why I say that is because I have a lot of experience. I've obviously been a student, but also I've always been involved. Almost every single year I've been in academics. I've been as part of the graduate committee that's in charge of a graduate program. So I've worked with a lot of students, and based upon that, and also talking to other students, this is what I've come up with as some advice. So, how many hours per week should one spend on coursework? Well, as a full-time student, you have to take 9 credit hours to be full-time status at this university. And full-time status means you are a full-time student. Equivalently, that would be like a 40-hour work week. Okay? Now, many of you also have some job that's outside of necessary coursework. In particular, like being having an assistantship, a teaching assistant. Maybe some of you also are research assistants, or will, I guess, down the line be RAs. And typically you're employed at a 0.49 FTE. FTE stands for full-time equivalent. So full-time is 40 hours per week. So take 0.49 times 40, you get 19.6 hours. So make sure you don't go over that. One reason why the university says you don't want to go over that is because then there's some tax issues with that. And also they might be required to give you benefits. You should get benefits, but that's a whole other story. Students, it's interesting because this is actually something that's I know there's been some court cases recently about this, is that if you're a TA, are you an employee of the university? Well, you would think, yeah, I'm getting a paycheck from them. But no, the university thinks of you more as, we are paying you to learn, not as an employee. And so there's been some recent court cases that, and this has been at private universities, can TAs form a union? And they are now are being allowed to do that. In order to form a union, you have to say you are an employee. And so courts are actually starting to allow them to do that. I was a TA for 5.5 years in grad school. And so I don't think TAs get the I'll just say overall the benefits that they should. Think of it this way. You're gonna have to, if you're a TA here, are you gonna have to use a computer to do your job, to prepare for class? Are you given a computer? Okay. Sure, we have these computers that are available, like in our department, available, in our department outside offices, but still. And in my personal opinion, you should be given a computer. Okay, well, who's going to pay for it? The university doesn't want to. All through grad school myself, I use my own computer. So anyway, it's getting off track here. So combine full-time student status and being a TA or RA, that's about 60 hours a week. That's a lot. When I was a student in TA, I usually averaged at least 60 hours a week. You translate that into, 7 days a week. Well, that's about 9 hours per day. And so, I'm giving you one example here of how I got through grad school, but I've seen this work for other students too. But when I was in grad school, especially when I was working on my dissertation, I would spend 9 to 12 I make sure I get a good night's sleep, because it's hard to do research when you're tired. From 9 to 12 every day, I would do work, take some time off, get lunch, watch all my children. From 1 to 5, I would get back to work, then have dinner, do some other stuff, and then from 7 to 10 plus, I would do work again. And that was usually my schedule every day. Now, there were obviously times when I'm not doing this, like I have to go to the grocery store. I have to eat. I played a lot of volleyball in grad school, so maybe take an hour off to go up to the rec and play some volleyball. But that's what I had to do to get by. Other students, maybe you can get by with less, but that's what I had to do. So again, the reason why I'm telling you that is to give you an example where, at least for me, it worked out. Maybe this might not work out for you, but at least worked out for me. So also, something that I think students, and I found myself to be very helpful, is to make connections with other students. What I've seen is that students who just work on their own have a lot more difficulty getting through classes than if working with others. So for example, when I was in grad school, when I was a master's student, I was in a study group. Well, we didn't call it that, but it was essentially a study group of 4 students. And the way that we usually did things was that we would try to do our homeworks or other assignments as much as we could on our own, and then we would get together and then we would compare answers. There was some problems maybe I didn't get that maybe another student in my group got, and they would help me through it, and vice versa. There were times where none of members of our group got an answer, so we would try to solve it together. The key is that when we did that group work, we always made sure that if I were to turn in something, I actually knew how to do it. I wouldn't copy it from one of my group members and not know how to do it. So there were times where I couldn't figure out what my group member was doing, even if he tried to explain it to me, and so I try to get partial credit on a particular problem instead of turning in what he had for an answer. But by having that study group, you really learn from others. And I don't know if I think it would have been a lot more difficult for me to go on for a PhD if I didn't have that group of individuals there to help me. In this group of 4, 2 left with a master's degree, and 2 went on for a PhD. Myself and Chris Malone, who's now a professor at Winona State University. And again, us too, when we were taking our PhD courses, we would work together in a very similar manner. And it would have been a lot more difficult to get through grad school for either of us if we didn't have the other one there. So I highly recommend that you make connections with your other students. Most of you are taking a lot of the same courses right now, so maybe you have two study groups, 3 study groups, and it's okay to communicate across study groups, and we would often do that too. So there was another study group that was taking like Stat 882, 883, and we would go talk to them about problems too if needed. I found it very useful to talk to students who have been here longer than you. They can give you some very, very good advice. I strongly recommend that you do that. Find some of our experienced graduate students. Begin working on homework when it's assigned rather than waiting until later. So grad school can be quite stressful, and especially if you wait to start a homework assignment until the night before it's due, you're adding to the stress. So don't do it. Start when the homework is assigned. At least when I was in grad school, I would often look for ways, how can I reduce the various stress aspects of grad school? And that was one way that I did that. Take advantage of faculty office hours. We're here to help you. Take advantage of it. I know it can be intimidating to talk to faculty. I was intimidated of the faculty when I was in grad school. And so that's one reason why, for example, I ask you to call me Chris rather than Dr. Biller. Think of me as a coworker rather than necessarily somebody who's way up here. I've been through grad school myself. I know how difficult it can be at times, but I also know how rewarding it can be too. And I'm happy to help you out. So stop by my office and say, hey, Chris, can you help me? Pay close attention to Office of Graduate Studies deadlines. It is your responsibility, not my responsibility, not the departmental secretary's responsibilities for you to meet those deadlines. They're nicely laid out. Take a look at them. Make sure you know, okay, I need to get this paper in if I'm going to graduate this semester. I need to get in at this particular time. The UNL Academic Calendar is good too. Especially if you're not used to, let's say, courses in the United States. This gives you, what we sometimes take for granted. Oh, this is when we have this particular day off, like Labor Day, for example. Also, course registration dates typically is the end of October, beginning of November, when you can start registering for courses in the spring semester. So for those of you who are maybe master's students right now and are thinking about going on for a PhD, this is what I've seen as a rule of thumb as a way to help you decide if, yes, a PhD is good for you to do. Students who typically get almost all A's in the master's required courses typically have lots and lots of success at the PhD level, especially for courses like 882 and 883. The reason being is because your PhD required courses are building upon the required master's courses. That's why. For students who get mostly B's in the MS required courses, the chances for success, from what I've seen for those who have tried to go on, are typically low, unfortunately. For students who get a mix of A's and B's, I've seen some students who have a lot of success at the PhD level, but also some students who have not. So the key is do as well as you can in those MS required courses and see what happens. Okay? If you choose not to go in for a PhD, getting a master's degree, hey, that's great. That is quite an achievement to get that master's degree. It might be disappointing not to get that PhD. The master's is something really good to move with too. Make preparation for the PhD qualifying exam your top priority now, even though it will not be until January 2018. Make it your priority now. What I mean by that is, don't just sit down right now and start studying for it. But when obviously, this PhD qualifying exam, sorry I failed to mention this, is over basically your master's required courses. So like a Stat 882, 883. And put together your study materials now for 882 and 883 for when you, let's say, are getting prepared for a test. Put them in a nice enough format so that you can use those when you want to study for your PhD qualifying. So the way that I approached this when I was a student was I outlined all the notes that I took during class. I created my own outline of those in terms of highlighting the important points, things that maybe I wanted to go back and review. I outlined them. I also supplemented with information from the corresponding book that we would use, and I might have also added in information from various homework assignments. So I have a many page outline, and when I would study for a test, like in a particular class, I take that outline and simply, there's obviously many different ways to say for a test, cover up some of it, and let's say I got to Rao-Blackwell theorem. What is that? Okay, let me review in my head what that is. I state it to myself, and then also I think about how to do the proof for it. That's something you have in Stat 883, for example. And I would do that throughout my outline. And I knew I was ready to study. I was ready to take a test in that particular course if I understood everything that was in the outline. By taking that approach too, it also helped reduce stress because, obviously a test is a stressful situation. And if you come in with confidence that, yes, I do know the material, you likely will do better. But with those outlines, then I was able to turn around and use them immediately for studying for my PhD qualifying exam, and I didn't have to waste time, let's say, putting together study materials for that. I already had them. Now, when I took my PhD qualifying exam, I ended up taking it, probably about, we would have had it during the summer. I postponed it because I had an internship that summer, so I wasn't able to study. And so I was probably about a year removed from a lot of the courses that were covering that exam. or were covered in that exam. And so because of that, maybe I ended up studying a little bit more for it, but I ended up studying actually 200 hours. And how do I know that? I use an old actuarial study exam technique, which is to actually keep track of your number of hours per day. If you don't know anything about being an actuary, you have to take tests to become an actuary. When I was an undergrad, I passed 4 tests. And what they recommend to do to make sure you study enough, you actually track the number of hours you spend per day. So I would actually have a calendar, and I would put 8 hours. And so anyway, so when I took the exam, again, 200 hours over a 3.5-week period. That was basically over winter break. That wasn't a fun winter break. It wasn't. I did go home for a few days and be with my family, but most of the time I was studying. Here, our exam will be essentially that same time period. And that winter break is unfortunately just not going to be fun. But again, if you make preparations beforehand, and also you'll have a lot of those courses you were just getting done with them, that will help too. Hopefully then, that will limit at least some of the time that you're going to have to spend, and anyway, you'll still hopefully will do well. Okay, so that's the end of that. Any questions? Yes?
Didn't the students in the department that just finished their first year take third qualifying
Yes,
exam?
And that's because they were under a different system. That's why. Obviously, there's going to be some similarities, but it's not going to be exactly the same.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So
Yes.
how many years is the PhD qualifying exam valid? Like if I don't want to immediately get a PhD?
That's a good question. I do strongly recommend that you immediately get the PhD after you get the master's. Some people might say, okay, yes, I'm going to go take off a couple years, see how much I like it, but if you're going to do it, it's best to do it right after, because you will unfortunately forget, all of us would, some of the material that you were learning in your master's program. It's going to be more difficult to get that PhD if you did take off that time. So in terms of then what is your answer to your question, to be honest, I don't know. I don't think I've ever encountered a student who did that approach here. Other questions?
How do you guys go about writing the qualifying exam? So it's going to be over every single class that we've taken.
Yeah, and that's something that, as part of me being the graduate chair, I hope to work with the committee chair for the exam committee this year to make that determination. I can tell you how we do it now for our current test structure. And that is simply a call goes out to all faculty, say, hey, submit a question. And that's how it's done. If there's not enough questions, then the committee has to make up their own.
I mean, like all the faculty who taught those classes?
Any faculty. So like, for example, I never taught 882 or 883 since I've been here, but usually I submit questions for 882, 883.
Oh, okay. And did you say you wanted to continue that sort of process or change it?
I want to do some changes to it. Until those changes are implemented, I don't think it's worthwhile for us to go into what may occur. Other questions? Okay, so next set of note, this career paths. Just briefly talk about it with the remaining couple minutes. So, in developing this course, I was thinking back to when I was in the same place as you guys, and I'm kind of surprised now looking back, thinking, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with a master's degree in statistics. Sure, I thought about, I might go on for a PhD, but I knew that I'll probably just end up with a master's and stop there. And I'm just shocked now looking back, like, I had no idea where I could go with a master's degree in statistics in terms of a job. What my original plan was, when I was an undergrad, I wanted to be an actuary. Because, of course, if you're a math major like I am, what are you going to do with a math undergraduate degree? Teach? No. Be an actuary. Well, get good money and stuff, Sure, I'll be an actuary. And, I passed 4 exams under a different test structure than they have now. But once I started taking basically the equivalent of Stat 460, what we have for 463 here, which is Math Stat 2, during my junior year as an undergrad, I thought, hey, this stat stuff, making decisions with hypothesis tests, confidence intervals, that's pretty cool stuff. Maybe I might want to go to grad school for statistics because, that will at least help with my being an actuary, and because there's a lot of statistics in actuarial science. But also it will give me maybe a little bit of an advantage over others who are applying for jobs, because not only do I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree. And so that's why I decided to go on for a master's degree in statistics. But also I knew that, maybe I might want to do something else than actuarial science. But at the time, to be honest, I didn't know what was available to me. And so I have found this to be the case for many other students. Not necessarily all students, but many other students. And so that's kind of the motivation behind one of those questions on that assignment was, I'm curious to see if you know exactly where you would go work if you were to leave with a master's degree or a PhD as well. And so anyway, so that's what this career paths document talks about in terms of, it lays out the options out there. And there's many, many, many different things you can do with a statistics degree. And so what I try to do, especially since I like to specialize in categorical data analysis as my research area, I made a lot of different categories for the different job paths. Not every job is going to fit into every category perfectly, but I think it's going to give us a nice way to talk about it. And so anyway, that's what we will start doing next time. Also, with this career path, so it's not just necessarily this document here, but as I mentioned the first day of class, we're going to have 3 alumni come back here and give presentations. And so overall, this will probably be the biggest part of this course here, is talking about career paths, what you can do. Okay, that's all I have to say today. Are there any questions? Okay, I will see you in, well, for this class, 2 weeks. For many of you, I will see you tomorrow instead of 8:50.